Most people think that leadership is about giving orders or making decisions, but what if I told you that the best leaders, they don't start with strategy. They start with a story, because that's what people actually follow. And after 2 decades of leading teams in war zones, embassies, and crisis environments, I can tell you this. If you want people to trust you, remember you, and follow you, tell them a story they can't forget. If you've ever felt like your team tunes out when you talk, or your message just doesn't land well, you're not alone. Most leaders, they assume that being in charge is enough to be heard, but real influence, it doesn't come from position, it comes from connection. In today's video, I'm going to show you why storytelling is your most powerful leadership tool, especially when you're facing resistance, change, and uncertainty. And I'll walk you through exactly how to use it to spark action, earn trust, and make your message really stick. I'm Michael Forrest, a retired Marine Sergeant Major, leadership consultant, and former U.S. diplomat. In 20 plus years of leading high-stakes teams, one lesson has never failed. Facts inform, but stories transform. Welcome to the Everyday Diplomat, where we equip leaders just like you with real-world strategies to lead with clarity, presence, and influence, especially when the stakes are high. Today we're talking about something deeper than leadership techniques. We're talking about the power of story, and why the best leaders, they don't just communicate, they connect. I wasn't always the type of leader that you see standing in front of you today. In fact, earlier in my career, I was dangerously close to becoming the type of Marine that I swore that I would never be. Disengaged, arrogant, and completely unaware of how far off course I had really drifted. See, I had just come back from Iraq, newly promoted to corporal, and riding the high of a combat deployment. I thought that I had it all figured out, but instead of rising to the challenge of this new leadership, I let my pride run wild. One reckless decision after another piled up until I found myself duct taped to a chair in a dark closet, a moment of absolute absurdity that forced me to really see the truth. I was failing, not just as a Marine, but as a person that others could count on. And that's when everything changed. Because right around that time, Staff Sergeant Ivan Valdez walked into my life and into our unit. With near legendary status. Valdez had just returned from Marine Embassy security guard duty, one of the most selective and respected tours in the United States Marine Corps. Not only had he served in this elite role, but he had been meritoriously promoted to Staff Sergeant, an incredibly rare feat even today, but especially during that era. He was sharp, composed, driven. He was the type of Marine that others talked about with a mixture of admiration and aspiration. He wasn't just technically proficient. He led with intention. There was something about the way that he carried himself, the way that he poured himself into others that instantly commanded respect. Marines wanted to work with him, and I was lucky enough to land in his section. Valdez saw more in me than I saw in myself at the time. And more importantly, he didn't try to fix me all at once. He led me one conversation, one correction, one standard at a time. He taught us to lead with pride, to sweat the details, and to treat our names on our uniform like they really mattered. I'll never forget the day that he pulled me aside and pointed to my chest and said, "Never forget that you wear 2 names. The name that you were born into, Forrest, and the name that you asked to be a part of, United States Marines. Everything you do reflects on both of those names. Never forget that." That moment hit me hard because I had forgotten. I had forgotten what it meant to honor this uniform and to be somebody my family name could be proud of. Valdez changed that. He didn't just prepare me for my next assignment, he helped reshape me into the Marine that I was meant to become. And he never stopped pushing me to level up. He would not stop talking about embassy duty, how transformative it was, how it opened your eyes to a different type of leadership and responsibility. At first, I submitted a package really just to get him off my back and to get him to stop talking about MSG duty. But deep down inside, I knew that he was right. By July of 2007, I was standing in Moscow, Russia, the crown jewel of the MSG program, the most coveted station in the entirety of the program. That's where I met Master Sergeant Rudisell. Master Sergeant Charles Rudisell was unlike anybody I had ever worked for before. He had this stone-faced seriousness that didn't just command the room, it set the weather in it. We called him Dark Cloud because in jest, but mostly out of respect. He didn't smile, he didn't joke, and he never missed a thing. He held that line so tightly that even the squared away Marines stayed on their toes. And yet it wasn't fear that drove us, it was that unspoken challenge to rise to his standards. You wanted to earn that rare nod of approval, that faint upturn at the corner of his mouth, the closest thing that would ever come out of him to resemble a smile that really meant that you were on point. At first, I did not get him, but Over time, I came to understand that Master Sergeant Rudisell, he wasn't just building Marines, he was building men. People who could lead under pressure, think critically, and then take full ownership of their words and their actions. I remember one moment completely vividly. We were at a casual detachment event, and I made a joke, and honestly, probably not even a good one, and it was about him, without realizing that he was standing right behind me. Situational awareness, not so great, I guess. Well, he didn't lose his temper. He just walked over, placed his hand firmly on my shoulder, and said, "Congratulations, Forrest. You just earned yourself some new responsibilities." That was it. No yelling, no paperwork, but the weight of that moment, it stayed with me. It was my first real lesson in decorum, that words have meaning, and even in informal moments, they carry consequences when you're in a position of leadership. From that point on, he handed me more than just work. He handed me trust, and that trust changed everything. You see, under Rudisell, I started to learn what it meant to really carry a team, not just perform on one. He taught me that accountability, it wasn't about control. It was about belief. Believing somebody had more in them and then holding them to it until they believed it as well. After Rudisell's tour ended, we welcomed Master Sergeant Andy Anderson to Moscow Station, and he was a completely different breed of leader. From 08 to 1629, he was everything you would expect from a senior Marine. Squared away, professional, locked into the mission. But when the clock struck 1630 and the workday was done, a switch had visibly switched in him. He'd host small gatherings, tell stories, and make time for real human connection. That was Anderson's gift. He made you feel like you were part of something bigger. Like you really belonged. See, this wasn't his first time on embassy duty either. He had been here before, years earlier, and he brought with him a calm confidence that only comes from experience. One of his more memorable and standout traditions was his hosting Marines at his on-compound residence after a night out, where he'd brew chai, set up the hookah, and created a relaxed space to decompress, relax, reflect, and talk about life in general. One night around 3:30 in the morning, like no kidding, 3:30 in the morning, I got a call from Andy, half asleep, groggily, and I answered, "Yes, sir." Anderson didn't even skip a beat. He goes, Michael, are you sleeping?" "Yeah, what time is it?" And he goes, "Good. Report here immediately." I was like, "Andy, I have work in the morning." He goes, "Perfect. I'll see you soon." Hangs up the phone. Click. He lived right on the compound, so getting there wasn't hard, but it was definitely 3 a.m. and I absolutely had work in the morning. I threw on a hoodie and walked over, and he answers the door wearing this flowing Middle Eastern style robe and smiles at me and waves me in. We sat there for hours, no agenda, just life talk over chai and hookah. Then as the sky began to lighten, he looks out and says something that I will never forget. He goes, "You remind me of a Marine that I mentored years ago. He came from the air wing, just like you. He was sharp, driven, a bit rough around the edges." He goes, "We worked together in Tunisia, and that young man, he ended up getting meritoriously promoted to staff sergeant." He goes, "Maybe you know him." I laughed outside at the thought because at the time, the Marine Corps had about 212,000 Marines, and the chances of me knowing any single person that he was talking about were absolutely non-existent. But I'm pretty sure that I smiled and said something like, "Yeah, it's possible." And he goes, "Well, his name is Ivan Valdez." It was like the room tilted. Ivan Valdez, the man who had turned my career around, mentored me when I needed the most, and then set me on a whole new path, was his Marine. I was sitting across from the mentor of the greatest mentor I had ever had. It was like meeting Yoda himself. And the timing was completely unbelievable because I myself had just been meritoriously promoted to staff sergeant. The very same rare promotion that Valdez had earned under Anderson years before. It hit me like a wave. I was now walking the same path, guided by the same wisdom, shaped by the same leadership lineage. This was more than a coincidence, and it was poetic. And it wasn't over. You see, I'm telling you all of this for a reason. And it's not just to walk you through my career. It's because one story told at the right moment can change the entire course of somebody's life. Valdez didn't know that his influence would ultimately lead me to Andy. Andy didn't know that his mentorship would echo back a decade later. But that's the power of storytelling and leadership. Not just to entertain, but to guide, to shape, and then to lead others towards who they're meant to become. Years passed and I had kept on climbing. I stayed true to the lessons that those gentlemen had drilled into me, and I poured into my Marines the same way that Valdez, Andy, and Rudisell had poured into me as well. At some point about a decade later, I had found myself stationed in Iwakuni, Japan, now as a gunnery sergeant. I remember my wife and I were in the backyard grilling burgers, and the kids were running around, and for a moment, just a brief moment, life felt full, stable, and rooted. And then a moving truck pulled up to the house behind us, and I watched it for a few curious seconds, but not really expecting anything out of the ordinary. And then I saw him, Gunnery Sergeant Ivan Valdez. I walked over, probably smiling like an idiot. Two gunnery sergeants who had once been corporal and staff sergeant, now standing shoulder to shoulder. That moment was everything to me. I didn't say it then, and I don't know if I ever fully said it out loud, but I owe so much of what I have to that man. My career, my confidence, even my family life. That chance meeting in Japan was more than just a reunion. It was a living reminder of how powerful one story, one relationship, one mentor can be. And if that wasn't full circle enough, life had one more surprise in store. In 2018, I was serving as a newly promoted first sergeant in San Jose, California. I was acting as the inspector instructor senior enlisted advisor. One afternoon, I was sitting in my office and a young lance corporal walks in, and she asks me a few work-related questions, nothing out of the ordinary, and then lingered a bit longer than most do. After a pause, she looked at me and she goes, "Do you remember me?" And I must have looked confused and probably gave her that half squint, half head tilt look that people give when they're trying to recognize somebody, or like when somebody asks you a future date or something that has nothing to do with time and you instinctively check your watch as if it's going to magically tell you the answer you're looking for. And I had just met her earlier that day, so my brain was working overtime trying to figure out what the heck she meant. Then she told me her last name, Rudisell. And just like that, I was hit with another one of those full circle out-of-body moments. The last time that I had seen this young lady, she was maybe 8 or 9 years old, just a little girl living overseas with her family while her dad, Master Sergeant Rudisell, was my detachment commander in Moscow. Master Sergeant Rudisell had no obligation to invest in me the way that he did. He could have done his job, kept me in line, and then just moved on. But instead, he chose to mentor me, to guide me, and to challenge me in ways that helped me grow. Not just as a Marine, but as a leader. That mentorship, it was a major reason that I climbed the ranks the way that I did. It played no small part in me landing the role that I was holding in that very moment. And now, more than a decade later, his daughter was standing in my office, and I was the one entrusted to lead her. It was overwhelming in all of the right ways, because in that very moment, I realized something powerful. Leadership, real leadership, it ripples across generations. What you build in one season of life might not reveal its full impact until years later, in ways that you never expected. Because Rudisell chose to invest in me the way that he did, I was now in a position to lead his own blood, with the same influence and values he had once poured into me. That's not just full circle, that's legacy. I did not tell you that story just to share my memories. I told you because this is the power of storytelling and leadership. It connects, it inspires, and it teaches. Think about it. If I had just turned on the camera and said, mentorship matters, would you remember any of that? Maybe, but after hearing about Ivan Valdez and Master Sergeant Rudisell and that 3 a.m. hookah call with Andy Anderson, I bet it sticks differently now. And if this video is resonating so far in any way, that's no accident. You've already seen how a story can hold attention, move emotions, and transfer a powerful lesson without ever sounding like a lecture. That's the magic, and we're just getting started. So don't go anywhere, because next, I'm going to give you a simple framework that you can use to turn your real-life experiences into stories that build trust, spark change, and leave a lasting impact. You don't need to be a novelist. You don't need to fake anything. You just need to understand what your people need to feel and how to structure a story that delivers it. Now that you've seen the power of story in action, let's talk about how to use it as a leadership tool. The truth is, you don't need to be a professional writer or speaker to tell a powerful story. You just need the right framework, something that I've used for years to help leaders at all levels connect more deeply and then lead more effectively. I call it the spark, the shift, and the send-off. Let's break it down. First, we have the spark. Start with that moment that lit the fire. This is where your story begins, not with background or context, but with the moment that really matters. Something changed, something clicked, or something went terribly wrong. It might be a moment of failure, fear, pride, confusion, anything with emotional weight. For me, it was the moment that I woke up duct taped to an office chair in a dark closet after a string of reckless and terrible decisions. Not exactly a highlight reel, but a spark. That's the type of moment that pulls people in, because it's real and it promises growth. Ask yourself, what happened that forced the change? What was it that made this personal? What was it that made you wake up? Next, we use the shift. Show how you changed. This is the heart of the story, the internal or external transformations that you went through. What lessons did you learn? What realizations did you have? What mindset changed? In my case, it was in realizing that I wasn't the leader that I thought that I was. I had rank, sure, but no respect. Authority, but no influence. That realization opened up a door for Staff Sergeant Valdez to step in and then mentor me. The shift is what makes your story more than just entertainment. It's where your audience connects with their own experiences to your own growth. The shift is what makes your story more than entertainment. It's where your audience connects their own experiences to your growth. Ask yourself, what changed and how did it change you? Then we have the send-off. Land the story with meaning. This is where you seal the impact. Don't just end with, and that's what happened. End with why it mattered, especially to the people who are listening. For me, the send-off wasn't just realizing that I had been mentored. It was realizing that I had become the mentor to Rudicel's daughter, no less. That's the legacy of leadership. So you ask yourself, what's the takeaway I want them to really remember? And how does this apply to their world? Put those three together, the spark, the shift, and the send-off. And you've got a storytelling formula that works in boardrooms, team huddles, keynotes, and even performance reviews. It's not about performance. It's about presence. It's not about the story being perfect. It's about it being true. And if it's true and you tell it with heart, it's going to connect. All right, well, we're nearing the end, but don't check out just yet because this last part's going to tie it all together and show you how to use it in real life. You don't need to memorize all of this. In fact, you don't even need to get it perfect. You just need to practice telling stories with real purpose. Storytelling is powerful, but like any tool, it has its time and place. Use it when people need to feel something, not just know something. You see, when your team is stuck, burned out, or facing change, when you're onboarding new members and need to build culture fast, when you need to remind people why the mission really matters, that's when a story can cut through the noise and hit the heart. That's when people lean in because it's not just data or direction, it's human. But here's the caution, don't overdo it. Storytelling is a leadership superpower. It's not a party trick. If every meeting that you have turns into story time, people are going to stop listening. And if your story feels self-serving or off topic, it's going to lose its magic. So before you share one, you need to ask yourself, am I telling this for them or for me? And if the story builds trust, teaches truth, or deepens the connection, sure, go for it. But if it's just to relive your glory days, save it for the office party. Because here's the real truth. Your influence as a leader, it will never come from the title that you hold. It comes from the stories people tell about how you made them feel. If this resonated with you and you're ready to lead with more presence, clarity, and influence, I've put together a free guide just for leaders like you. It's called 10 Steps to Confidently Lead High-Performing Teams, and you'll find it linked right below in the description. And if you want to go even deeper, my full leadership courses are also there when you're ready. No fluff, just real-world tools that work when it matters the most. So, until next time, remember, every business is a people business.